Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. A lawyer's pro-revenge on his boss. This opinion is shit, my boss told me. He'd been a lawyer for 3 years, and the firm assigned me to him for training, to show me, junior counsel, how to be a litigator. I disliked my boss for a number of reasons. He knew no law, and he expressed himself badly in writing. For a litigator, that's like strike 1 and 2 right there, and strike 3 was this: he had no balls. He was actually scared of going to court. I noticed this when he took me to assignment court one day, and when it was his turn to speak his hands were shaking. He was scared, in fucking assignment court, where all you do is set a trial date. What's wrong with what I wrote? I said. Not what I asked for, he said, turning away. But when I checked the memo he'd emailed me 2 weeks earlier, I saw that the opinion I wrote was exactly what he asked for. I knew what was up. He was going to delete my dockets for writing the memo and then claim he did it himself, thus leaving quite a bit short of my docketing quota for the month. I knew that he would do this to me, because he'd done this before. I knew that my memo would wind up on a partner's desk without my name on it. I knew that for a fact, because the firm I worked at was one of the first in the city to have a really good internal network. We were using email for internal communications before the internet became a thing. So the firm was way ahead in terms of technology, but not in terms of security, and not long after I joined the firm I learned how to surf away on the firm's hard drive and find interesting things, like evidence that my boss was plagiarizing my work. My boss was the very model of the young downtown lawyer. His perfect shoes always gleamed. He wore bespoke suits because he came from money. Everyone just took it for granted that he was on the partner track. I, on the other hand, was well on my way to nowhere special, so maybe he thought it was okay to fuck with me. If so, that was a big mistake on his part. I didn't like having my billable hours fucked with. I seriously resented it, because I was already being targeted as one of the juniors who doesn't docket as much as he should, and I was getting pushback from the partner who headed our team. I told the partner what was going on, but he didn't care. It was like being back in middle school and showing up in the office with bruises on my face and the principal saying boys will be boys and sending me on my way. You'll just have to work harder, or smarter, the partner said when I reported the latest bullshit thing my boss did to me. I couldn't work harder, I was doing the usual 6 days a week lawyers downtown are forced to do, but I could work smarter, and that night I thought up a plan. Christmas was coming, and I thought I'd give my boss a little present. It landed on his desk on December 24th, in the form of a memo purporting to be from the partner that my boss reported to. The partner was an old guy, and not really on board with emails and computers, so he did everything old school, on paper. So when my boss came in on December 24th and saw a memo on his desk from the partner with a legal research assignment, that wasn't unusual. The memo was drafted in the usual form that the partner used, because of course I had taken great pains to make sure that it looked authentic. My boss walked over to the little cubicles where the juniors worked, and gave me the same memo. Except his secretary had retyped it, so now the assignment was from him to me, instead of from the partner to my boss. The assignment was difficult, requiring me to do a deep dive into Admiralty law, its relationship to the common law, combined with a constitutional division of powers question. But this is a huge assignment, I whined, and I'm going to be away. Can't you get someone else to do it? Is it really urgent? The memo I'd forged to my boss stressed how totally urgent the situation was, but there was no way my boss could double-check with the partner, because the partner left the day before on vacation. That's why I'd waited until December 24th. No can do, my boss said, this is a big deal. Just let HR know. Maybe they'll give you time and half or something. He turned his back and walked away, thinking he had ruined my holidays. But he was mistaken. You see, I'd written a paper for a third-year course that was basically the same thing as the research assignment in the memo. So the only work I had to do, was to find the old floppy disk with the draft on it, fiddle with it a bit, and voila, a very detailed and very long memo on an obscure point of Admiralty law, with references starting back to Lord Coke's day. So I put the memo together, and took my holidays as planned. I wasn't traveling anywhere, because I had no money, but I saw my family and stayed in town, and I made a point of dropping by the office during the holidays, sending an email or two, establishing that I was around, and docketing all my time for the huge amount of research I was allegedly doing. So the holidays end, and I'm sitting in my shitty little cubicle with a huge stack of work to do, and my boss comes up to me, in one of his bespoke suits with a gold tie pin and cufflinks to match. He was wearing a gold watch, too. He was dressed up, even for him, trying to make an impression of some kind. "Where's that memo? You were supposed to have it on my desk when I got back. I'm going into a meeting at noon." "Just finished it this morning," I said, handing him the lengthy memo that was still warm from the printer. My boss took the memo in his hands and felt its heft, and he smiled. Then he turned and walked away without a word. Just before lunch I heard a commotion down the hall. It was a pretty loud commotion, as such things go, a loud fuck, and then a door was flung open. It was the partner, and he was screaming for my boss to get his ass into his office, now, right now, as in immediately. I had the pleasure of watching my boss scramble down the hall. "Just what the fucking fuck is this?" the partner said, standing in the doorway to his office, and holding my handiwork at arm's length with his thumb and index finger, as if he were afraid that handling it would soil him. My boss mumbled something, and then the partner ushered him inside. I heard more shouting, then the sound of muffled excuses, and then more shouting from the partner. Then the door flung open again. "Called in the 90s. Get your ass in here, too," the partner said, and I got my ass in there pronto. "Did you write this fucking memo?" the partner said. I took it from him and looked it over. "I wrote it. The cover page has been changed to remove my name, but other than that, it's mine. I spent all Christmas on it. Is there something wrong with it?" the partner exploded. "Is there something wrong with it? Something wrong? I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It's fucking useless. Totally useless." I explained that I'd followed my boss's instructions to the letter, and that I'd docketed more than 100 hours on it. At this the partner really went nuts, and told me to go back to my desk and fetch him the memo from my boss. I brought it to him, and when he read it, his face went red. He told me I could leave, and I hauled ass out of there. From my little cubicle I wasn't close enough to hear the full chewing out my boss got, but I heard the details through the grapevine over the next few days, about how the partners were seriously pissed that my boss had wasted over 100 hours of a junior's time on a useless task that was obviously a prank, and how had my boss not realized that he was being pranked, was he an idiot? I wasn't blamed at all, of course, I had been working under my boss's close supervision. My boss didn't get fired, but there were some good outcomes for me. For one thing, the partner told me to send him a copy of any memos I wrote for my boss, and that ended him taking credit for my work. My boss also stopped deleting my dockets for my research. Plus I got a belated Christmas bonus for having to give up on my alleged vacation to write the stupid memo. I really hated working in that place, but whenever times were tough, I'd think back to the case of the forged memo, and that always brought a smile to my face. Story 2. Military Revenge Story. Military Revenge Story. My first post, please be nice. This was back in 2013 when I was based in Holland, British Marine for context. I had been married to my wife for a little over 18 months when I deployed to Afghanistan. My wife had a job in the British delegation on base and got to know pretty much every Brit and their husband/wife. One day we were directly targeted by a vehicle-borne IED. Now, whilst it wasn't uncommon for there to be a threat to coalition forces in general, being directly targeted felt more personal for obvious reasons. That was also the day I found out about an RAF guy back in Holland had tried it on with my wife. I found him on Facebook and, still feeling rather raw about Terry trying to blow me up, messaged him words to the effect of, "If you go near Mrs. von_Scraunumer again I will put glass in your throat the next time I see you." The next day one of my bosses, who was also RAF, messaged me on Facebook to say that this guy has been over to his office and basically tattled on me. He gave me a friendly warning / heads up that this guy could have gone to the MPs and reported me. I have no idea what would have happened, but L acknowledged the warning and said it won't happen again. My boss had my back and actually told him to wind his neck. Fast forward to when L got back from Afghan. A few days had passed and I was starting to settle into a normal life again. My wife brought it up, after explaining she didn't mention it at the time due to my reaction the first time, that an army sergeant major had tried to message her via Facebook. He told her she was beautiful and wanted her number. She promptly blocked him. I was pissed off to say the least, but I understand why she kept it until I was back on home soil. The next day I went into our department and spoke to my other boss, an army captain. I told him what had happened and he said, "Leave it with me." He basically had a chat with him and nothing came of it. I felt deflated and even more pissed off. That was until our senior military officer came into our department. He welcomed me back and asked how my tour was. Still pissed off, L said, "It was good, sir." With the exception of Sergeant Major Douchebag trying to get round my wife, he was, understandably, a little taken aback. About an hour or so later he emailed me saying that he feels the need to do something official about this. Something I had forgotten was that the Colonel and Sergeant Major belonged to the same regiment, so having one of his own behave like this had clearly gripped him. I told him the full story and provided screenshots of what Sergeant Major Douchebag had said to Mrs. von_Scraunumer. For this to go official my wife had to provide a statement. Unfortunately, Mrs. von_Scraunumer is very non-confrontational and said she didn't want this to continue. I respected her wishes, of not wanting to provide a statement, but hatched a plan that would be 3 years in the making. The timing is important. I emailed the Colonel and said that Mrs. von_Scraunumer has declined. However, I felt the need for some formal recognition, so L asked that Sergeant Major Douchebag write a letter of apology, addressed to both my wife and L, which is to be signed and dated. This was granted and I received said letter 2 days later. It said, "Lance Corporal and Mrs. von_Scraunumer. I am writing this letter to you both to apologize for the torment and anxiety that you both must have felt from the messages that you received from my Facebook account. To Mrs. von_Scraunumer. Nobody should ever be in a situation where they worry about going to work because of who may come through the door, especially so, when they have the added stress of a partner being operationally deployed at the time. The anguish that you must have felt at this time is immeasurable, and for this, I apologize. To Lance Corporal von_Scraunumer. Being operationally deployed is stressful enough without the added stress and worry about family back home. Support from home and loved ones is what carries many people through tough times whilst on tour. For any undue angst caused, I apologize. I regret any hurt and anguish caused by this issue and apologize, wholeheartedly and unreservedly to you both." Signed. Sgt Maj Douchebag. Position held. I now waited. I saw the rest of my time in Holland, moved back to the UK to my new base and waited some more. Almost 3 years after I received the apology letter, I looked up Sergeant Major Douchebag's wife on Facebook. I had known the whole time we were out there that he was married, his wife lived back in the UK, and he has routinely tried to cheat on her. I sent her the same screenshot which I had sent to the Colonel. I also, before leaving Holland, printed off the emails between the Colonel and myself where I requested the apology letter. I blanked out the Colonel's details, and sent the pictures of that. And then, lastly, I sent a picture of the apology letter, signed and dated by her husband admitting what he had done. Once Elle saw she had read it, Elle blocked her, blocked Sergeant Major Douchebag and all his friends who had also been out in Holland at the same time. Why 3 years? I remember him saying, before he turned into a douchebag and tried it on with my wife, that he only had 3 years left to serve. If my timing was correct, he was months away for completing his 22 years and receiving a very nice pension. If his wife decided to go ahead with divorce, she would take half of said pension, which would essentially fuck him over for the rest of his life. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.